Thanks, guys. Today, if it's your first time, you may not know the speaker who's going to be speaking today. But if you've been here before, you would have seen this guy. He's on the stage probably every single week, and he's usually behind one of the instruments, be it the guitar or be it the drums or even be it the mic. And today we have the honor of having Jamie Laneson share with us the message today. For those who don't know Jamie, I was trying to think, how can I just describe him quick, because I've known him for a number of years now. But the best way I could describe him is, I just thought about it. This past week, we played a soccer game, and Jamie is our goalkeeper, all right? And I don't know if you've played, and it's quite a social league, but it's not a social league, all right? So it's heated competition all the time. But the best way to describe Jamie is, this is what just happened this past week. While we play in the game, the other team, all right, who is shooting and trying to score, continues to praise Jamie and say, man, he's a phenomenal goalkeeper. Actually, the words that I can remember one of the guys saying is, wow, I love that. That is excellent. Have you ever seen that happen, in the opposition team praising the other opponent? But that is how Jamie is, and I'm just calling that out because he's a guy of excellence. He puts his heart and soul into everything that he does, be it his business, be it his relationships, and be it the music and the way he serves here at Gracegate. He's here every single week serving, and we love you, Jamie, and thank you for taking the message today. So can we just give a hand as we welcome Jamie?
Wow, absolutely no pressure after that, right, Wes? No. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. As Wes said, I'm Jamie. Pleasure to see a bunch of new faces that I've never seen before. If this is your first time here at Gracegate today, a massive welcome to you. You're in a very safe space here, and it is fantastic to see you. If this is not your first time here, it's also fantastic to see you as well. It's really cool to see so many people that have come here. They've made an active decision to come to church, especially on a long weekend. You could be so easily going off on holiday. You could be so easily staying in bed on a rainy day like this, but you've decided to come here to church today, and I'm seriously so excited that you have. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited is because of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. We all experience this topic to varying degrees. For some of us, it's a mild inconvenience, but for a lot of us, it can actually be very difficult and sometimes even quite debilitating. But before we dive in, I just want to give a bit of context to where we're at. We're currently in week 5 of our Traveling Light series, where we've sort of been talking about the different burdens that we can go through in life, and a couple of different ways that we can combat them. So in the first week, Bree kind of set the scene by talking about the luggage of life and how much better it is to live life when you're traveling light without having to carry around these burdens everywhere you go. In the second week, Graham talked about excess baggage, and he followed this up really, really well with this idea of self-reliance and how instead of relying on our own strength, we should actually rely on God's strength. In week 3, Walter shared with us this topic of fragile luggage, which was exploring the burden of bitterness and the effect that this can have on our lives. And last week, Jordan looked at oversized baggage, or this concept of doubt, and that while doubt can have the power to diminish our value, it is belief that has the power to propel us forwards. So the scene's been set pretty well. And before we kick off with today's topic, I'd love to just say a quick prayer if you don't mind. So if you could please bow your heads with me. God, today we're going to be exploring a topic that is extremely relevant to so many of us. I pray that we are all receptive to whatever it is that you're trying to teach us, Lord. Help us to open our eyes and our ears and our minds to what it is that you have to say. And today we are praying for transformation, God. That when we walk out of here, we will be renewed, we'll be refreshed. And we can just travel lighter and more freely. In your glorious name, amen. So this week, we're unpacking this idea of lost luggage. The burden of fear and worry in our lives. And this is an absolutely massive obstacle for many of us, and there are so many different things that we can worry about in our lives. But imagine what kind of a life we could live if we weren't worrying. Is it possible to live a worry-free life? What would that look like? But before we go on, I actually just want to ask a question with regard to lost luggage. Has anybody here ever lost their luggage before? A couple of people down the back. What was that experience like? Was it quite stressful? Yeah, I can imagine it would have been. I've actually never lost luggage personally myself, but I've been pretty darn close. And even that was a super stressful experience. The one time that springs to mind is a couple of years ago, my brother and I went back to England for a couple of weeks to visit family, because all of our family is over there. It was an awesome trip on the whole, and we got to see relatives. We got to catch up on stories from the last decade that we hadn't been there, because obviously we've been here. And we got to see some things that we'd never really seen before. And I've actually got some photos of the trip, if you don't mind me sharing. So, yep, that's us in London. Got to see the London Eye, which is pretty cool. Took a boat across the Thames. There's Buckingham Palace. God Save the Queen. Big Ben, looking pretty good. He actually, can we just go back to Big Ben? Sorry. Had some construction work going down there. Yeah, hopefully he's all right now. I'm sure he's fine. The Tower of London. I threatened to lock Will up in here because he was annoying me. But anyway, the London Bridge, and in the background, I love this photo actually because it kind of shows the contrast between the kind of things you can see in London. You've got the really old historic buildings, but in the background you've got this really modern cityscape. It's a really cool contrast. So that building in the background there, which you can see here as well, is called the Shard. So you've got this really nice contrast between modern London and old school London. Oh wow, I don't know how that ended up in there. So this is something that I found in my grandparents' house. A couple of photos of this really handsome young chap and his brother. Don't know who that is. And that's us today, woohoo! Or a couple of years ago. So there were a couple of moments on the trip where we tried to use public transport. And for the most part, this was a pretty cool experience. In England, the trains are pretty cool. But they did let us down a couple of times. In this particular instance, if we could just go back one, we were stuck on the train for about an hour. It wasn't moving because the sun was so hot that the tracks had swelled up and the train wasn't allowed to move, so we were stuck on the train. And the next one is the one that I want to talk about, is this train ride that we had from Liverpool via Birmingham to Winchester, okay? So to set the scene a little bit, my mum's family is mostly up in the north of England near Liverpool. So England sort of stops about here, Scotland's up there. I'm from this little area near Chester here, and most of Mum's family is up in Liverpool. And so we landed in Manchester. I can't actually remember. I think we landed in Liverpool. But in any case, after a couple of days in Liverpool, we decided that we'd make the trek down to Winchester because that's where my dad's family's from. Now, because it's not New Zealand, there is actually a pretty decent train network in England. You can pretty much get between any main towns anywhere in the country, as long as you plan your trip accordingly. And so we discovered that it would just be a single stop to get between Liverpool and Winchester, right? So this is a 6-hour journey, there's one stop in the middle. It sounds pretty awesome. All we have to do is get on the train in Liverpool, get off the train in Birmingham, go to a different platform, get on a different train in Birmingham, and get off at Winchester. How hard can that be, right? It sounds pretty straightforward. Yeah, we found out that that wasn't so. Being tourists, we didn't account for a couple of things, okay? The first thing we didn't account for was the sheer busyness of Birmingham New Street train station. This is the train station. And when I first thought we were going to be doing a changeover in Birmingham, I imagined this little platform, maybe there'd be 3 trains there and we could just hop off one and hop on another. But this train station is an absolute metropolis, okay? There are so many people. It is absolutely bustling. It is the biggest and busiest train station outside of London. It is a central hub for many of the railway lines in England, and it is the national hub for the cross-country train network, which is the one we were using. So this place is packed. It's busy. There are people traveling. They've all got their bags, trying to bustle between trains, and it is an absolute nightmare. The second thing we didn't account for was the size of the place, okay? As if the number of people wasn't enough. The thing is enormous, okay? There are platforms upon platforms. I don't know if you can see, because this is a really zoomed out image, but there's a little train track there, and there are just platforms upon platforms all the way along here. And it is enormous. So even if it's empty, it takes a decent amount of time to get between platforms and around the station. And the third thing that we didn't account for was the size of our bags, okay? Now, I'm normally a fairly light packer. When I go on holiday, I just take the essentials. I take what I need. Sometimes I underpack and I forget stuff. But this time, I had a 26-kilo baggage allowance on my flights. So I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll just bring everything that I own on this trip to England. Because look, you never know. Like, I'm going to be staying in families' houses. I don't know what it's like in England anymore. I don't know if they have washing machines, all that kind of stuff. So I brought all of my clothes with me. I ended up using literally 4 t-shirts, quite literally 4 t-shirts. And if we were to go back to some of the Snapchats, well, I'm not going to bother doing that, but you'll see that I'm basically wearing the same thing in all of them. Because so I didn't need all the baggage that I had. But I took it anyway because I thought, just in case, maybe I'll need it. Turns out I really didn't, and it actually ended up being a big hindrance, which, as hopefully we've seen over this Traveling Light series, is kind of how life works as well. Like, if we're carrying these big bags around with us, it's actually obstructing us in where we're living our lives. So, with those considerations in mind, what was supposed to be a relaxing half-hour changeover, we were supposed to have 30 minutes, felt like one of the most stressful 30 minutes of my entire life, okay? It didn't help that the train from Liverpool to Birmingham was 15 minutes late, okay? So our time was immediately cut in half. We had 15 minutes to get off the train and get on another one. But that sounds reasonable, right? 15 minutes? Like, if I was to stand here for 15 minutes in silence, that would feel like a heck of a long time. So surely that's long enough to, like, get off a train and get on another one, right? Cool. Maybe we'll be okay. Should be easy. But in order to get between our platforms, we had to go up a level, up to the next floor. And because our bags were so big and the station was so busy, we couldn't use the the escalators. We had to use the elevators. So the escalators, there were people kind of going up, and it was working in a really cool system. But because we had such big bags, we had to wait in line for this lift that was taking up 3 people at a time, and then coming back down, and 3 people at a time. And then there's this elderly woman who's trying to put her bags in, and then this man who's trying to help her. And then there's these kids that are screaming because the door's closing because they've got their bags sort of half in the elevator, and then it's getting stuck. And it took a long time to get up that lift. So we lost a decent number of minutes just trying to get up a level. So we're down to about 12 minutes now, but surely that's still enough time to get to the platform, right? We can get on the train, we can get comfortable, and then we'll have 5 minutes of breathing room, and we can just sit and we can relax, and we can enjoy the even longer train ride down to Winchester. But then I had a question. Where the heck is the platform? We got off the train, and we got up to the next level, but then what? Where were we going? We actually literally had no idea where we were supposed to head, and we had 12 minutes to find out where we were going, to actually get there, and then get on the train. So in this time, I started freaking out here. I exchanged some very harsh words with Will, because we were supposed to be planning this together. He didn't know where we were going, so I was frustrated with him because I didn't know where we were going. And so we had to spend some time researching maps and asking people and looking for directions and figuring out which platform we needed to be at and where the heck in that metropolis the platform was. So after some searching, we were down to about 10 minutes, but we finally had a direction. So we fought through the crowds. We lost another couple of minutes, had to wait in line for another lift to take us down to the platform. Same problem. 2 minutes left. The train leaves in 2 minutes. But it's okay, because we've got on the lift, we're down, and we're on the platform. So 2 minutes, we can walk to the train. That seems fine, right? Turns out that each platform was actually 3. They're all kind of like stacked on the end of each other. And so we're over here on platform, I think it was 12A. We need to be on 12C, which is 3 entire train lengths away. And we've got 2 minutes to do this. And it seems kind of reasonable that we could do that in 2 minutes. But of course, that's when the train actually leaves and the doors close before that. So we look in the distance and we think, oh, wow, okay, is that our train? Yeah, that must be our train. So we start moving. And we see in the distance there's no people outside the train. Everybody's already on the train. So we think, oh, okay, there's a problem here. This train's about to leave. And I've never done like weight training before, but that was an absolute trial by fire. Like, I had my bags with me. I was bolting across the platform. And this is going to sound crazy, but it literally happened like this. As we were running along the train, the doors were closing one by one. Literally, like in front of us. We were about to hop on one, and it would close. And so we'd be sprinting along, and then the next one, and it would close. And then the next one, and it would close. And we'd be like, what's going on? Are we not supposed to get on this train? Like, why is this happening to us? And so, yeah, we were absolutely freaking out. And then Will had this fantastic idea. As we were running past, he started pushing the open door buttons. Because the problem was we couldn't just like hit one of the buttons and have the door open and hop on. It was allocated seating. And of course, our carriage was literally the other end of the train. Like, so we started here and we had to go over there. So we were running along this train, we were pushing all the buttons, trying to get the doors open. All these passengers were like, what the heck's going on there? What are these tourists doing? Yeah, it was absolutely mental. And so we're getting close to our carriage, and then Will says, that's the one, that's the carriage we need to get to. It's got the little number on it, and we're almost there. But then what happens? I'm pulling my bag along. There's a little rock. This tiny little rock. And so my bag's got these tiny little wheels, right? So even the smallest bump is going to make a big difference. So I'm dragging my bag along. The wheel goes over the rock, and it starts to tip. It doesn't tip away from the train. It tips towards the train. Of course it's going to tip towards the train. Everything else has been going just fantastically. So it tips towards the train, and there's this gap between the trains. So, yeah, it's sort of about, like, so the platform's here, and the gap between the platform and the train is about one of my bag's widths away, like to the millimeter, I promise you. It was too good to be true. So in any case, like the next few seconds, they happened in slow motion, man. Honestly, like I was there and I was running and the carriage is there and it bumps and then time just stopped. I was right, okay, one of two things can happen here. I can either lose my entire bag down the side of the train and have to live for another 2 weeks in England with nothing, because I'm not getting that back. Like, I'm not going on the tracks. No one's going to go on the tracks. It's going to get run over by the train. It's gone. Or, hopefully, I can pull it back and I'll be safe. Thankfully, it was fine. Like, this would be a completely different story. It's stressing me out just thinking about what would have happened if the bag had actually ended up down on the tracks. So for those, long story, but for those of you that have lost luggage before, I can relate to an extent, so I can't even imagine what it would be like to actually lose your baggage. Suffice to say, I was pretty worried in that moment. And I certainly don't think it's a coincidence that Wes has asked if I could take today's talk. I've always been quite a big worrier. A lot of people can attest to that. Naomi is one. Where are you sitting them? Yeah, she can definitely attest to that. There have been times where I've just been freaking out about stuff that has seemed so small and so insignificant, but it's just kind of I've been overcome with this worry. But even to a smaller extent, like whenever I leave a room, I perform the pocket pat down. Do you guys know what the pocket pat down is? Yeah, some of you do. It's basically when you check your pockets to make sure that you've got the essentials on you before you go anywhere, right? So my one looks like phone, keys, wallet, business cards. Sounds reasonable. It's a good idea to check for those things. But because I'm such a worrier, I do it twice. And I only noticed this the other day. Like, I don't do it intentionally. I actually just do it twice because I'm worried that I've forgotten something. Like, in the space of checking my phone and my keys and my wallet and my business cards, I'm worried that in that time, I've lost my phone or my keys or my wallet or my business cards. So for some reason, I check it twice. Or like, if I live up in Warkworth, right, which is 30 minutes away, and so I'll pack a bag for a day because I got footy in the evening or whatever, and so I'll put my boots and my goalie gloves in the bag and I'll zip it up, and that's fine. Then I get in the car, got to check, haven't I? Like maybe the boots have fallen out in the way to the car. Yeah, so like I worry about a lot of stuff. Happens all the time. Now these are fairly small and arguably useful things to worry about because like sometimes maybe I have noticed that maybe I don't have my keys and that would be a bit of a mission, you know, if I lost them, or maybe I don't have my wallet on me. Speaking of, actually. No, I know where it is, it's all right. But it does quickly get a little bit out of hand. So if we go back a couple of years, I can think of a time where I was learning how to swim back in England. And let me tell you, I was terrified of water, okay? Like baths were questionable. I'd start freaking out in the bath a little bit because it's a body of water and you can drown and all that kind of stuff. And so what does mum do? She puts me in a swimming pool. And I was not a happy camper. I can still remember clinging to the side of the pool, screaming for mum to come and get me, like, why have you forsaken me? Why am I here? I was 100% certain, honestly, 100% certain that I was going to drown in that moment. I was like, this is it. At 5 years old, this is it. This is how I die. Like, I've had a good run. And it's you know, I've played with some Lego and had a younger brother, and my parents were kind of nice to me, apart from putting me in a pool where I died. But like, you know, it's okay, it's fine, it's all right. All the while wearing my bright orange armbands and the shallow end of the pool. I'm gonna die, oh no. See, in that moment, my immediate reaction was fear and worry, but in actual fact, that was not a reasonable response to the situation I was in. I was terrified that something was going to go wrong. But I was actually very, very safe in that situation. I had my bright orange armbands on, pretty cool. I know what you guys are thinking. That's awesome fashion sense. There were lifeguards around. There was a qualified swimming instructor. Mum was watching nearby. But my fear clouded my judgment. And it's not just moments like that that can cause us to worry or be afraid. There are actually so many things in life that can cause us to worry, just stuff that we go about in our daily lives. And fair enough too, right? Like there's actually a lot of uncertainty when it comes to a single day, let alone a whole week or a whole year or even an entire lifetime. And so there's a few examples of things that we can actually worry about. The first of which is money. We can worry about money. We can also worry about time. We can worry about health. We can worry about relationships, work pressure, finding a job, what others think about you. And that's just a really small glimpse of the stuff that we can worry about. And sometimes we don't even know what we're worried about, just that we are worried. And so we get worried about the fact that we're worrying, but we're not sure what we're worried about, but we feel worried. So that amplifies the worry. So we feel even more worried about the fact that we're worrying and we're not sure what we're worried about. And the cycle continues. See? And in general, I think worry comes from this fear of the unknown. It's this uncertainty surrounding an outcome. As humans, we love to know what comes next, and we love to be in control of a situation. So when we're not sure what's coming tomorrow, we can very, very quickly start to worry and stress ourselves out with what ifs. Okay, so for example, in terms of money, we might worry about where the next paycheck's going to come from, and fair enough. Or if we have enough money to pay the bills, what if I don't have enough money for rent? In terms of time, we might worry about not having enough time to get everything done. What if I can't get everything finished? In terms of our health, we might worry that we'll suddenly get sick or get worse than we currently are. What if this is the healthiest that I'm ever going to be? In terms of relationships, we might worry about whether a friendship or a romantic interest will last. What if I lose this person? What if I lose them? In terms of work pressure, you might worry about failing to meet that deadline that's been hanging over your head, and this is one that gets me all the time in my business. Like, the deadlines are insane, so I'm constantly worried about deadlines and about work pressure. What if I fail to meet my responsibilities? In terms of finding a job, we might worry about whether or not we'll even find a job. What if I'm unemployable? And in terms of what other people think about you, we might worry that people won't like us for who we actually are, or how we act, or how we speak. What if I'm not accepted? See, when we start asking these what ifs, we actually start becoming focused on the future rather than what's happening in our moment in front of us right now. We start to look ahead and we start to second guess what could be when we don't actually know for sure how it's going to pan out, right? And at the end of the day, this can actually have some pretty serious negative consequences overall. And I probably don't even need to list them because I'm sure most of us here worry quite a lot because there's a lot of things to worry about. But it can stress us out, it can cause sleepless nights, it can make us grumpy, not much fun to be around. But even more seriously, it can lead to some pretty serious health problems. And if we're feeling completely overwhelmed, then worry can stop us right in our tracks and leave us unable to move forward any further. It can be absolutely crippling sometimes. But I have a question for you. Can worry be a good thing? Can worry be a good thing? It's a fair enough question. And you could argue that since worrying is sort of looking ahead into the future, you're preparing yourself to handle a possible outcome. Okay, you're looking ahead. You might be worrying about money so that you can save up for a house. And surely that's beneficial, right? Surely that's beneficial. But I think there is a very distinct difference between worry and preparedness. Okay? Worry and being prepared. It's one thing to think ahead into the future and plan for what's coming up, like saving money to buy a house or preparing a CV for a job interview, or even buying groceries for dinner. That's being prepared. Those are all really good things to do. But when we start to worry instead of that, that's when we can begin to feel the weight. It stops being a harmless plan of action and taking active steps, and it starts becoming this emotional response fueled by stress. So when we're preparing for the future, for example, we're taking logical and active steps to improve our outcome. So again, if you're saving up for a house, you're physically putting aside money. That's a step you're taking. That's preparation. But when you're worrying about the future, you've just got the emotional response with no action. Okay? Instead of putting money aside to save up for a house, you're just worried about the situation of buying a house, but without putting aside any money. Does that sort of make sense? Like the worry is separate to the actual action? So worry itself is not a helpful process, and it doesn't directly change your outcome. It might inspire you to make some changes in your life so that you can plan ahead, but the actual worry itself, that emotional stress-fueled feeling, is generally not useful. And of course, there will be exceptions to the rule. If you've got a truck hurtling towards you on the wrong side of the road, fair enough, that's a good time to worry. Your survival instincts will kick in. You need to veer off the road or put your brakes on or do whatever. That's a good time to worry because you're in physical danger. And on that note, one of the very deceptive things about worry is that it can make you feel like you're in immediate danger when you're actually not. Okay? Now, in these instances, it's very helpful to ask yourself the question, is my worry a reasonable response to this situation? Am I worrying because I'm in immediate danger and I need to act quickly, like swerve away from a truck? More often than not, with the worries that we experience in our daily lives, it's not actually the case. We actually find that our worries are not necessarily a reasonable response to the situation because we're not in immediate danger. So if we can take the worry away from those situations and instead have a plan of action to tackle those situations, we wouldn't have to worry about the stress of that. And thankfully, Jesus actually tells us fairly bluntly that we shouldn't worry. In one of his most famous sermons, the Sermon on the Mount, he talks very specifically about worry. And we can pick it up in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 25. And it says this, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry." Sorted, he's done the talking for me. No, but seriously, do not worry. That's what he says. He says, literally, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes?" And he goes on. "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" Isn't that a really good question? And I absolutely love that question because it is such a good point. Like, what can we actually benefit from worrying? What do we gain from it? Does the actual act of worrying about a situation that is out of our control really help us in any way? And it goes on later in verse 34, and he says this, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow." Again, do not worry, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. It's pretty clear, right? Again, do not worry. Yet at the same time, it's a pretty big challenge for us. Like if you tell someone to just not worry about something, it's like, "Oh, thanks, cool, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. You've solved my problem." No, that doesn't really work like that. And I realize that worrying isn't exactly a choice. For the most part, nobody actually wants to worry. It's a fairly involuntary response to a stressful situation. And to an extent, it's natural. As humans, it's natural for us to worry about stuff. What we can do, though, is take active steps to combat worry so that we don't have to carry its burden around. Okay? Well, we can't necessarily avoid worry, but we can take active steps to manage it so that we don't have to lug that big bag around. And in our first week of this Traveling Light series, Bree shared with us 3 steps for how we can handle pretty much any of the different types of baggage that we'll be talking about. And I think it's worth a recap because these steps are so applicable, particularly when it comes to this topic of worry. So the steps you shared were tag it, unpack it, and go to the help center. So to expand on those, tag it. Identify exactly what the burden is. So in this case, if it's fear or worry, you can actually go one step beyond that and identify specifically what it is that you're worried about. Name it. Give it a name. Call it for what it is. Identify that specific thing that you're worried about. Be it money, be it time, be it relationships, whatever it is. Put a tag on it and identify what you're worried about. Step 2 is to unpack it. Look at it in more detail. Why is it that this particular thing is making me worry so much? And again, that same question. Is this a reasonable response to my situation? Do I need to be physically stressing myself out about this right now? Am I in immediate danger? And step 3 is go to the help center. And that's the real kicker. So this is you're talking about it with friends, with family, and with God. And don't bottle it up or let it build. Because sometimes even just by having those conversations, you can gain a different perspective that gives you a fresh outlook. And so you might not even be worrying anymore, which might be enough. See, if we lose our luggage at the airport, isn't that the first thing we do? We go to the help center. We don't sort of stand there and think, oh gosh, I'm really stressed about my bag's gone missing. Hope it shows up. Whew. We go to the help center. We ask for help for it. So why don't we do the same thing with the worries that we have in our lives? Surely that would be a more logical response, right? Is it because we're embarrassed? Is it because we think that our worry is too small or insignificant? In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, we are told, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Okay? All of it. Doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter how small you might think it is. Okay? Cast all of your anxiety on him. There is no problem too big or too small for God. He can handle it all, and he wants to handle it all. Doesn't matter how small you think it is. God is the greatest help center that we could possibly ask for. He's always here to listen, regardless of how big or small we think our worries are, and he always wants what's best for us. There are countless times throughout the Bible that we're told we don't actually need to fear, and that we should instead turn to God with our fears and our worries, because God has got tomorrow covered. One of my absolute favorite verses in the Bible is found in Philippians. And it was one of the first Bible verses that I can actually ever recall hearing. It was on our fridge for a good number of years. And this was even before I was really paying attention to anything about God or Christianity. And this verse was on the fridge, and I kind of looked at it and I thought, oh yeah, it's got a pretty flower border. Of course it does, it's mum. It's one of those feel-good things, whatever, she can do whatever she wants. But only recently did I start unpacking it and realizing exactly what it's saying. And it's found in chapter 4, verses 6 to 7. And it goes like this. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Far out. That is a hope-filled statement. I'm going to leave again. The Bible has so many good things about worry, and this is one of the best verses for it, honestly. I could have highlighted the entire thing. And because I don't want to miss anything, I just want to, if you don't mind, I just want to kind of break it down and point out a couple of things specifically about this verse, about how much hope it gives us. So first up it says, do not be anxious about anything. And that is anything. And that's confronting. Don't be anxious about anything. With God on our side, we don't actually need to let the burden of worry weigh us down. It's not a burden that we need to carry around. Do not be anxious about anything. But in every situation, again, every situation, doesn't matter how big or small you think your worry is, in every single situation, by prayer and petition. Sometimes we might not even know how to talk to God, but prayer is like a direct line to him. When we just shut out the rest of the world and we spend some time with him, that's when we can connect with him best sometimes. With thanksgiving. This one is enormous. Okay, if you're worried and you're stressed out and you're sharing your worries with God and you're calling out to him, how the heck can you do that with thanksgiving? Isn't that the last thing you want to be doing if you're stressing out about something? But here, we're asked to do it with thanksgiving. That is so confronting. But imagine if we actually did this. What kind of outlook would we have? What kind of perspective would we have in the world if we actually gave our worries with thanksgiving? Present your requests to God. Again, God wants to hear whatever it is on our hearts that's weighing us down. And this next section, honestly, is my absolute favorite. And the peace of God, in those moments where we're overcome with fear or worry and we turn to God, he can actually bring us peace so that we're not worrying about it. He provides us shelter in the storm, which transcends all understanding. Okay? I love the word choice here. He could have said, which defies all understanding, or which contradicts all understanding, or goes against all understanding. But it's more than that. It transcends understanding. It goes above all understanding. In those moments when we're so worried that we don't know where to turn anymore, the peace of God just doesn't go against our understanding. It soars above everything that we ever thought was possible. Peace that we didn't realize was even possible when we're so distraught with fear. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Wow. I don't know your exact situation here today. I don't know if you're worrying about something. If you're not, fantastic. That's cool. I'm very, very happy for you. But chances are, there's something in the back of your mind that's been worrying you this morning. It's inevitable. We all worry about stuff. But what I do know is that if you put your trust in God, if you let him know what it is that you're worrying about, by prayer and petition and with thanksgiving, he can bring you peace that is far beyond all understanding. So how do we do this? Like, practically, how do we do this? It's easy to talk about presenting our requests to God, but like, what are some actual steps that we can take to do this, right? I was having a very interesting conversation fairly recently with a couple of the lads, and we bounced around a few ideas of different ways of connecting with God. And I think what we basically decided at the end of the day is that it depends on who you are, and like everyone has a different thing that they can do to connect with God. For some people it's music, for some people it's worship, for others it's getting outside in nature, for some people it's sports, some people it's reading the Bible, spending time in prayer, having cool conversations. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do to connect with God, but I think it kind of boils down to one main thing, and that is being present. Now, the phrase be present is thrown around a lot, but I think a lot can be said for just stopping and immersing yourself in the moment that you're in right now. Because fear and worry make us focus on the future and the uncertainty around what's to come, but being present allows us to focus on the moment that we're in and appreciate what we have with thanksgiving. So a couple of little tips. I don't have all the answers again, because honestly, worry is something that I struggle with a lot. But a couple of things that I jotted down. The first is just get away from it all. Like, if you're finding that you're getting overwhelmed by your fear or your worry, take yourself somewhere else where you won't be distracted by the situation. Like, when I'm stressed out about work, I'll take a lunch break, I'll go to the beach, and I will just sit in the moment. I'll try not to worry about the deadlines. I'll try not to worry about the stress of responding to clients, because in that half hour, that is not going to be dangerous for me, if that makes sense. Like, I can sit in the moment for that half hour, and I'm still safe. By doing this, you're removing barriers and distractions that might make it harder to connect with God, so that you can more easily present your request to him and connect with him. And the second one is acknowledge God in the small things. See, when we start to pay attention to what's around us and acknowledge God in the small things, it's a lot easier to be present, because we can take ourselves out of that worried mindset. So instead of worrying about what's coming up, we can focus on what's right here, right now. Because, we need to remember that the process of worrying is not in and of itself useful. It doesn't actually change our outcomes. There are a lot of things in the world that can stress us out. A whole bunch of them. I only shared a snippet because I could go on for hours about all the things that we could worry about. There's heaps out there. And it can really shake our confidence. But we are told by God time and time again that we do not need to worry, because he's actually got tomorrow sorted for us, so we don't need to stress. All we need to do is step out in faith and trust that he'll meet us where we are and bring us a peace that is far beyond all understanding and all comprehension. I was originally going to finish here, and I've kind of tossed around with the idea of sharing this story at the end, and I urge towards not, because I'm not a super huge fan of being vulnerable on stage, but I think it's quite a relevant story. Again, being a worrier about a lot of things, I would always have a plan. I'd always have a plan of attack. I'd always be thinking 6 steps ahead. So in high school, my plan was that I would do well in biology, I'd get good grades, I'd go to university, and I'd study biomedical science, and I'd get good grades in that. And then I'd go into medicine, and then I'd be a doctor. And that was my plan, okay? That was my plan for my life. I didn't need to worry because I got it all sorted out, okay? So I was marching through this plan. I was like, yep, cool. High school, good grades, ticked off. Yep, cool. Biomedical science, entry, ticked off, awesome. Good grades in biomedical science. Yep, ticked off, fantastic. But what really threw me was the change in that plan and the uncertainty that that brought. So I very quickly realized that I did not want to spend the rest of my life being a doctor. So I sort of tossed and turned with it, and I actually ended up dropping out of university. And that threw me a lot, because all of a sudden, I didn't have a plan. Okay, I had a plan for my entire life, or at least my entire student life, that I was going to do this thing. I was going to be a doctor. And then all of a sudden, what now? What do I do? And that uncertainty for me, like, that was absolutely crippling. Like, whoa, yeah, man. It was full on. It was intense. And I got to this stage where I can remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was home alone. I was in a pretty bad spot, and I ended up just literally on the floor in a heap in tears, like, what the heck am I going to do with my life? I was so uncertain in that moment. I didn't know what was going to come next. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have control. And that was overwhelming. That was absolutely overwhelming for me. And I didn't know what to do. And like I can look back now and see that God was there in that moment. I didn't realize it at the time. But what happened was I was on the floor. I was literally in tears. And then all of a sudden, there was nothing. And it was really weird. I remember thinking, gosh, have I stressed myself to a point where my brain has broken? Like, I've been worrying about this thing, and I've been stressed out about it. And fair enough, like, I've had this plan, and I've been certain what's coming. But now I've stressed myself to a point where my brain doesn't function anymore. Like, I can't worry about it. I can't think. Like, there was nothing. Like, I was super aware of the floor that I was lying on. I was super aware of the room. I was aware that my drum kit was sitting in the corner. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go play drums. That sounds kind of fun. I was aware that my bed was there. I was like, yeah, I could go for a nap. That's cool. But like, it just kind of lifted, and I didn't fully appreciate what had happened in the moment. But looking back, I think it's exactly this. I think I was so worried and so stressed, and I was crying out to God, and then He gave me that peace. He gave me that peace that just transcends all understanding. I think I didn't realize it at the time because it doesn't make sense. It's not what we'd expect, right? It transcends all understanding. So God, today, as we're here chatting about fear and worry, I know there are a lot of people here, like myself, who worry a lot about a lot of different things. And some of them are perfectly valid, God, but I pray that you, just make yourself known to us. Make yourself known to us. Help us be present and help us connect with you in ways that we've never imagined it before, Lord. Because I know that your peace, God, when we present our requests to you, when we cry out for help, you'll be there. We might not understand it. But your peace, surpasses everything, God. So please give us the courage and the strength and the faith to step out and meet you where you want to meet us.